this?
All right. Welcome. We're so excited to have you guys here.
Episode 1.
Episode 1 of the Hopefully Many.
It's been a long time coming, too.
Yeah.
I feel like the people on with Josh and the Dry Heat have known about this for like the last 6 episodes.
Yeah.
It's like Nuke, how we keep saying, oh, my scheduling is sporadic. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I wait 4 weeks every time now.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Well, thank you for adjusting to my schedule. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's okay. I enjoy doing these. Like I said, it's cool just sitting down with friends and just talking. And hopefully there's listeners.
Yeah. Well,
and viewers.
Yeah. For those who don't know, this is Josh and I'm Amber. And we are your hosts of Speaking Spatter.
Speaking Spatter.
And we're so excited to be here.
Number 1. It feels weird, especially because we've done the other ones for a long time now.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Enough that I forget the episodes.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. So basically, we are going to tell a true crime story. Or I'm going to tell a true crime story to Josh, and we're going to talk about it and do what we do best and make things humorous, or try to make things humorous, because that's all you can do when you're talking about things that are so dark and so
so heavy.
Dark. Yeah, heavy.
Yeah,
heavy.
a lot of heavy stuff.
Heavy is a good word.
And as always, I do like that we highlight the victims in these in these situations, because definitely want to tell their stories more than their victimizers.
Right.
So
yeah, but that's what we try to focus on more than the people themselves.
So what are we talking about today?
So today, for our first episode, you've been requesting to hear about La Luz Del Mundo.
Yes.
So finally, I did it. I was really hesitant to do it because it is very heavy. Mm-hmm. It is very long, and there's so many details that I was like, I don't even know where to begin doing this.
Yeah. And I know you'll condense it, because it is one of those things. If you really wanted to sit here and talk about it, you could make like a 3-part episode. Like you could be like, we're gonna do
easily.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
And do it that way. But yeah, we'll get a quick, I guess a faster version of it. But like I said, I heard the story myself. So one of the ones that I actually have heard about it beforehand. Mm-hmm. Even though I do like when I have never heard about it.
Yeah.
You tell me, I'm like, okay, I'll be surprised.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Start right off bat. All right. Give credit where credit's deserved. My sources are the great Wikipedia, Guardian.com. There was an article by Lauren Metchling that I used, and LA Times had 2 different articles, and I was confused on what their titles were, so I didn't title them, but they're by Leah Miller and Richard Winston.
Okay.
So La Luz Del Mundo is a church that was founded, and it means light of the world, and currently they have anywhere from 1 to 5 million followers. It's kind of uncertain how many they have. But it was founded in 1962 by Aaron Joaquin Gonzalez in Jalisco, where he was actually a former shoe vendor. He self-identified himself as an apostle. He built a church and then preyed on the poor and defranchised people who sought salvation, making them hand over 10% of their earnings as tithings, kind of like most churches.
Yeah.
Aaron held power in the church until 1964, when his son Samuel Joaquin Flores took over, and then following Samuel's death in 2014, Samuel's son Nason Joaquin Garcia assumed leadership. So during the early years under Aaron, he traveled to different states, and I'm going to do my best with pronunciations. Mm-hmm. Please don't come at me in the comments. I'm even going to pull this closer so I can. Michoacan and Nireta and Sinaloa, different states in Mexico, to go and preach. And in 1931, the First Supper was held to commemorate kind of like the church and the crucifixion of Jesus. And they met in a rural area, fearing that the Catholic neighbors at the time in Mexico would be like, get out of here with your non-Catholic ideas.
Oh, gotcha. That's different.
Yeah.
Different what they believe. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So that was in 1931. In 1934, they finally built a temple, and it was built as a part of the sector of Liberated in Guadalajara's urban zone. And the members were encouraged to buy homes in the same neighborhood so they could establish a community.
Okay.
So the church was built, and then they were like, buy the homes around, build homes
Yeah,
around.
this reminds me of the first time I went to Utah to see the Mormon, like with the Mormon church. Mm-hmm. The neighborhood we stayed in Provo, like there was literally like a whole subdivision, and the church was literally in the middle of the subdivision. Like roads led to that church.
Well, even like the temple in Mesa, there are neighborhoods that like lead right up to the gates to the temple in Mesa.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely something that I've seen before. So yeah, always interesting.
I feel like that's not important. So Samuel Joaquin Flores was 27 when he started finding the church after his father died, and he continued. No, that's not right. Sorry, what happened? Oh, okay. So Aaron dies, and when his son takes over in 19... what is happening? Sorry. Okay.
Here, I needed a moment.
Scratch that.
Yeah.
So the first temple was built in 1934. The next leader to take over was Aaron's son, Samuel, and he was the youngest of 8 siblings. So Samuel took over when he was 27 after his father died, and he continued his father's desire for internal expansion, and he continued to travel outside of Mexico extensively to try to recruit people and get people to come into the church. He visited members in Mexican states and in 1964, and later that year went to Los Angeles on a missionary trip. By 1970, the church had expanded to Costa Rica, Colombia, and Guatemala, which is crazy.
Yeah, 4 countries now.
Yeah. So there was another small temple built in, along with the first, there was a small temple built in Hermosa Provincia, but it was demolished and replaced with a larger one in 1967. So there was another temple in that area, but it was demolished and rebuilt.
Okay, gotcha. So that original one is not there anymore.
No.
They said too small.
So at this time, there were approximately 72,000 members, and it increased to 1.5 million by 1986 and 4 million by 1993. And people are like, well, how did the church grow so fast?
How'd you expand? Yeah.
And it's attributed to things such as like social benefit, which improves living conditions of the believers. So, by having the community be so close to the church could provide things or help people, or, you give me 10% of your earnings and we'll help you find a new path. And by building these communities, you created like, oh, you need somebody to sew your pants. Oh, well, there's Jane down the street who can sew your pants.
Yeah, almost like a socialist society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Charles is going to be so mad at me. I'm hitting the mic all over. So Samuel, who was the second leader, oversaw constructions of schools and hospitals and other social services in the area, which also helped grow the community within La Luz Del Mundo. And then the church expanded to the UK, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Ethiopia, and Israel between 1990 and 2010. So it's not like, I feel like a lot of times when we talk about true crime, you think of like, oh, this happened in the 70s and 80s. Like, no, 1990s to 2010, it's still happening.
Right. That's when it's blowing up even more.
Yeah.
Which is so crazy because I don't remember ever hearing about this church at all.
Right.
So it's just kind of like under your nose is that it's just kind of like.
Right. And the fact that it's so huge and we've never heard it, didn't really hear about it. So by the end of Samuel Joaquin's ministry, La Luz del Mundo was present in 50 countries, 50. After the 50 years ahead of La Luz del Mundo, Samuel died in 2014 on December 8th. On December 14th, 2014, Nason Joaquin Garcia, the 5th out of 8 of Joaquin's children, became the leader of La Luz del Mundo. And Nason was born in 1969 in Guadalajara. Nason previously served as a church minister for 22 years, and he launched this basically like a news network, but just for the church. It's called Brea International. Ooh. I don't want to say it wrong. Okay. It was like the Brea Network, basically.
Okay.
And it was the church's media and publishing company.
So like how like Mesa has like their local news.
So the church had their own one, so they would have like people reporting from the church and like doing events on the news and like showing like the celebrations and things that they would have.
Yeah, but it makes sense because I guess if you're in Israel and they're doing events in Jalisco where they're headquartered, it's just a good way for you to see it. Yeah. Smart.
So under Nason, the church also expanded to 8 additional countries. Mm-hmm. And then just like a little background. So females in La Luz Del Mundo were not allowed to wear jewelry, makeup, or have short hair. They were taught to dress moderately, which means wearing like long dresses and skirts, like really not a lot of skin showing. Women had to wear head coverings during religious meetings. And according to an interview, women were considered equal to men in social spheres and had equal capabilities of attaining higher education. However, they weren't allowed to become ministers or serve in major leadership roles in the church. So they couldn't be like, I don't think they had them, but like youth group leaders, or like they couldn't go up and preach on Sundays. Like they weren't allowed to do that. It had to be all men. And women were taught to submit to their husbands. And according to a 2020 census, scratch that. That doesn't make sense. They were taught women to submit to their husbands. So mostly like any other kind of
that Iron Age language. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is where it gets heavy. I'm starting to get like into the crimes. Want to put some trigger warnings on sexual abuse and assault and just those kind of things for anybody who's listening who might be sensitive.
So at this point, they're in about 55 countries.
Yep.
And they have over 1 million members.
At this point, they had upwards of 4 million members.
Upwards of 4 million members across almost 55 countries in 2014.
Yep.
Okay.
So La Luz Del Mundo had been a subject of several controversies. Church leaders have been accused of creating cult personality, sexually abusing their members, and have been criticizing for amassing wealth, living in lavish style, and attempting to build cities that entirely revolved around the church. In 2022, the church director, self-proclaimed apostle of God, Nason, pled guilty to 3 charges related to sexually abusing children. So that's where that HBO documentary comes in.
Okay.
The one that we both watched before this. I guess, so that also where I want to give credit to, because some of the stories I want to tell are from that.
Okay.
So it gets its cult personality and traits because the members were basically worshiping their leaders. So they would, like, the members would go to church and be like, oh, Nason, like you are the best. You are amazing. Like, what is God telling us today? And kind of like praise Nason or Joaquin or whoever was leading at the time. And be like, oh my God, you're so amazing. What does God say? Like they were worshiping the leader more than they were worshiping God or whoever himself. They were speaking to himself.
Yeah.
There was, sorry, it's like so hard to talk about because it's so heavy. There was a story that was told on the HBO documentary. I forget what it's called, but if you search La Luz Del Mundo on HBO, it comes up. So for anybody who wants to watch it, there was a time where the church had to all come together to like the main hub to like worship for like 7 days straight. I forget necessarily why, but one of Nason's secretaries was like, hey, my little sister, she can't go to school because everybody's going to be here and nobody's going to be at home to watch her because everybody's going to be here. Can she just stay with me during this celebration? And Nason was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. So she stayed with her, and then the secretary had like left her in her office and like went to go do something, and Nason had requested that the little girl, come to her. And when the secretary got back, she was like, "Where's my sister?" And they were like, "Oh, Nason requested her." Yeah. And at this time, his secretary kind of knew there were weird things going on, didn't necessarily know what was going on. Mm-hmm. So she ran and found Nason and her sister, and Nason was naked under a sheet, and the little girl was massaging his feet. And she was like, "Don't do this.
Yeah.
I won't tell anybody what happened. Mm-hmm. My sister just needs to come back with me." Yeah. And then he was like, "Okay, go take her. Get out of my face, take her." So that whole story is on there, and it's just really disturbing. And Nason learned to do that because his dad did it, and mm-hmm. his dad learned to do that because his dad did it. So it was just this generational thing passed down where they would get kids in these situations, and once they were comfortable massaging their feet, they'd be like, "Oh, massage my legs. Oh, go up a little farther.
Right.
Oh, touch my penis." Mm-hmm. Just, and they're children, so they don't know better.
Right.
There was another woman in the HBO documentary who talked about, in order to get married in the church, it had to be approved by church leaders. And
okay.
She fell in love with this guy that she had met within the church, and so she went and she was like, "Hey, can we get married?" And they approved it. And you hear the husband's side of the story, and it's so sad because Nason had this effect over her to where when she went to work, she was performing sexual acts.
Okay.
And then would go home and be like, "Oh, I don't want to necessarily sleep with my husband or have intimacy with my husband," because she was just quote unquote intimate all day with this other disgusting guy. Mm-hmm. So she realizes at some point this all isn't okay when Nason asks her to come into this room, and there was a little boy sitting in the room, and he was like, "Kiss the little boy." And she was like, "Absolutely not. I'm not doing this." And he was like, "Kiss the little boy or your family is going to be ruined." And she was like, "I'm not doing this." So she went home and told her husband, and they pulled their kids out of the school and got everything together. And her husband was like, "I had no idea this was going on." Mm-hmm. And that all makes sense. Looking back on why she would come home upset or be like, "I still have to serve him," or, mm-hmm. Things like that, because she was so brainwashed from a young age that this is what you do, and you still get married and you go home and do it, but you have to do it to me because I'm your leader. So it was the mentality he had over people was, you have to do it. I'm your leader. You have to listen to what I say.
Got it. Otherwise, I'm going to ruin you.
Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things I talked about, was the community was so big that they could off you and nobody would really know, or nobody would ask questions about it because nobody wanted to ask questions about it, because you don't ask questions in this church.
And especially if you said if you built a whole community of these people, mm-hmm. and they end up killing you, I'm like, everybody in that community knows, well, we're just not going to say anything,
right?
And then it's what do you go on,
right?
If everybody around doesn't care, then it's it didn't even happen. Yep. It's kind of at a dead end there.
So the HBO documentary has a lot more stories like that, and it goes into a little bit more detail. It's just really hard for me to put all of that into words, mm-hmm. and feel like I'm doing it justice. So mm-hmm. That's the gist of it, basically. So on June 4th, 2019, Nason and a co-defendant, Susanna Medina Oksana, were arrested in Los Angeles County, while a fourth co-defendant, Azalea Rangel Melendez, they were all arrested, but Azalea was at large and still is to this day. Nobody can find her to put her on trial, to arrest her, and
okay,
whatnot. So the reason why they were able to arrest them in LA is because this woman who had to go in and was told to kiss a little boy, that happened in LA. So a lawyer was contacted and was like, "Hey," in the United States, they were contacted and they were like, "Hey, this is what's going on." And she was like, "We can't arrest anybody in Mexico. We don't have jurisdiction there." Mm-hmm. But if you can find a crime that's taken place in the United States and we can pinpoint them, we can arrest them.
Okay.
So this crime with the little boy happened in California. So on the next time that Nason and this woman, where'd her name go? Susanna, were flying back, the police were able to like get them off the jet, like
and arrest
them right off the jet. And then so that's why they're only tried for so many sexual assaults and so many sexual abuse cases, because a lot of it happened in Mexico, where they can only find, certain ones happening in the States. So the California Department of Justice alleges that between 2015 and 2019, Nason Joaquin and the 3 co-defendants of his committed 26 felonies, including human trafficking, producing of child pornography, forcible rape of a minor. Heavy shit. So before being denied bail, Nason's bail was set at $50 million due to fears that his followers would raise enough money to free him,
to get him out,
and that he would flee the country. And then once you flee the country, it's really hard to extradite somebody
to get
back.
Him back. Yeah.
So they
especially if you don't have good relations with that country.
So they set his bail super high because they didn't want the church to come in and be like, we'll take care of it. And then later on, he was end up being denied bail because they were scared he would flee if he did get it. His co-defendant, Alondra Ocampo, pled guilty to 4 felony counts involving sexual abuse of minors on October 2020. Ocampo alleges that Samuel Joaquin Flores, the previous director of the church and the father of Nason, raped her during a trip to Guadalajara when she was 8 years old, and that she suffered years of sexual abuse as a minor. Nason's former... Okay, pause there. So this woman, Alejandra Ocampo, helped traffic and abuse minors, but because she pled guilty, she didn't have to go on trial, and her husband is standing by her because he truly thinks and believes that she didn't do anything wrong because she didn't know, because she was abused as a minor so young. In his mind, he sees it as that's all she knew. She didn't know better. And if that's what was done to her, it makes sense on why that's being done to other kids and why other people get involved and why other people are quote unquote roped into it, because that's what they were taught was okay and what was right, to go into these rooms and please these men doing things, or please Nason or Joaquin or Aaron or whoever
they were asked to.
And without question, because you don't question the leadership of the church. So her husband is like stood by her, and he was like, she didn't tell me about all of this. She didn't know better. I'm standing by her. So when she's done with her prison sentence, which I don't know if I have it in here or not, they are going to go in a witness protection program because she pled guilty. She told, the justice system what happened. And they're afraid that the church is going to come after them for pleading guilty and being like, no, these things are true. So they're going to go into witness protection when she gets out, which I think it's an amazing thing that like her husband is standing by her. And, it's really unfortunate that she was a part of all this, and whether she knows or not, like she said, I did wrong. I'm now aware that I did wrong, and I'm willing to take the blame for that. It's like really hard to swallow that. One of Nason's former assistant was identified as a witness, and she is a Jane Doe in the case. And she alleges that she was raped by Nason, and she became a child groomer also because she was groomed and groomed girls in Guadalajara as well.
Okay.
So there were, let me see if I have it in here. So I don't have it in here, but there were about, I want to say there were 6 women, 6 Jane Does who came forward to be like, yes, this sexual assault happened. Yes, this sexual assault happened. Yes, this sexual assault happened. And to speak at Nason's trial. It was really unfortunate that all of this happened during COVID because everything got like pushed back due to COVID reasons, and because everything was pushed back, it expanded everything, and it took a really long time for like a hearing to be ever had, because before you go to trial, there's a hearing so somebody can plead guilty before you even go to trial, those types of things, or take like a plea deal. So that gave Nason's attorney more time to come up with a plan, time to figure out a good plea deal, time to talk to people and be like, stand down, or don't do this kind of thing. And
they probably would say it was an act of God.
Yeah, exactly. So finally, after years, it was like a year and a half of waiting for this to go to trial. 2 days before his trial, Nason Joaquin Garcia pled guilty to 3 charges related to sexually abusing children. Which means he took a plea deal. Which means the 6 or how many ever Jane Does that came forward will not get their day in court to tell the judge, to tell the jury what happened to them and how it's made them feel and how they've lived the rest of their lives since.
Gotcha.
Which is really like fucked up, because anybody who goes through that should be able to tell their side of the story, should be able to say, this is what happened to me and this is why this person needs to go to jail.
Right. And
this is why they deserve the biggest maximum sentence you can get. Like gets me all riled up. So even after Garcia's guilty plea, his followers remained undisturbed in the church and continued to worship him. According to the lawsuit, the women said they were routinely coerced since they were children to believe that Garcia's wishes were direct orders from God, and if that did not obey it, that would lead to catastrophic consequences, including eternal damnation, unspeakable tragedy, infertility, and countless harms to others. So, like if you were a little girl or a little boy walking into these rooms, you were told, well, your mom and dad are going to die if you don't touch me here or do this or
right.
turn around so I can whatever.
And if it happens, then it's like, well, it's your fault. Like, and I told you this was going to happen.
And God is telling me that you need to do this. You have to listen to me.
Yeah.
And, so, your children, you don't want your parents to die. So, in weeks leading up to Garcia's plea deal to 3 criminal counts, he exchanged the counts for criminal counts for a reduced sentence of only 17 years in prison. So he pled guilty to, let's go back and read this, charges related to sexually abusing children instead of 3 criminal counts, which got him 17 years. So this was from one of the articles. It says, what we are going to do is begin to ask people to send in their victim impact statements. Says this woman, Lulu Wiegand, who runs a private Facebook group for former church members like herself to discuss the Garcia case and share information about inappropriate behaviors by clergy. She recently put out a call to help identify people who may have been sexually abused or mistreated at La Luz Del Mundo, and it was quickly picked up by other La Luz Del Mundo related pages on Facebook and was a popular Reddit group for former members who said they were abused. Wiegand also is also promoting an online petition, which to date has hundreds of signatures calling for Garcia to be removed from all religious registries in Mexico now that he must register as a sex offender. The Jane Does feel like the plea deal was a slap to the face, says one of the one of the women who came forward. She says she's another survivor who left the church She said she's worried about the message it will send to other possible victims who could be less willing to speak out after watching the Jane Does become targets of intimidation and harassments by church loyalists. So by Nason taking the plea deal, not only does it start to discredit those women who came forward, but also hushes the people in the church who are being abused currently.
Right.
Because it's like, well, they couldn't even talk about it. So what makes me think if I stand up and say something, I'll get
change. Yeah.
about. Yeah. So even though like this is a huge deal, it hasn't squashed the church. Nason still remains an apostle and is the supposed messenger of God, and still leads sermons via telephone from his jail cell. So that's the short. That's all I have. That's the short, the long and the short of La Luz Del Mundo, the light of the world, church, culty, disgustingly leadership. I feel like there was a lot more about the trial because it kept getting pushed back. So, like I said, like Nason's defense got to talk about and think about so many more strategies that they can come up with. And the part that really makes me upset is the Jane Does weren't told he was being offered a plea deal. And all parties within the case should be informed when a plea deal is brought to the table, and they weren't. So when they found out he took the plea deal, like it was a huge slap in the face.
So just like blindsided by it.
Yeah. I remember I was sitting there watching the documentary, and I paused it and I got up to go to the bathroom, and I said, this motherfucker is going to get away with it. And I came back and I unpaused it, and the next sentence out of their mouth was, and then he was offered a plea deal. And I paused it again, and I just started bawling because it's like, there's no justice for these women. Right. There's no justice for these children. Like, granted, they're grown women now, but they were children.
A child, yeah.
And this little boy that was brought into a room and told, you're going to kiss this woman. This woman's going to kiss you. Children.
Yeah.
It's beyond me that he didn't go to trial for this and that they let him take a plea deal.
Right. That you did not get life sentences for every one of those women that were coming forward.
Yep.
So, and do they specify, I know I saw the documentary as well. I can't remember if they specify why they offer him this plea deal. Is it just because it's a difficult case to prosecute? And did they feel like he, like the defense or the prosecution wasn't going to be good enough? Because usually why you give a plea deal, like you know what I mean? You're like, this is what we're going to do. Because if you go to trial, nothing might happen. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to take that chance.
Let's see. I can't fully remember. Let me read this real quick and see what it says here.
Okay. You gotta do the hip hop.
It doesn't really say. I think it's so when you're offered a plea deal, the defense and the prosecution have to come together and agree
right
on the sentencing of
the terms and everything.
Yeah. So I think what they said is they just had a really good case against what the women were saying.
Okay.
And I think that's why the prosecution and the defense agreed on a plea deal, and that's why they went to a plea deal instead of trial.
Instead of trial, yeah.
Which it's also like, what is the defense doing? Or I can't remember which side is which, but it's like, why? Mm-hmm. There was a woman attorney on the case. I remember her talking about it a lot, and she had like an interview and she was like, we're not done fighting this. We're not going to stop fighting this. So, you know, come forward, read, get on these groups, you know, be on the lookout because we will figure this out. We will, you know, bring justice to this at some point. We just need more time. And it's crazy because these churches are everywhere and you don't necessarily realize it. Like here in Arizona, there's this big observatory looking thing, like on one of our major freeways.
Yeah. And in Phoenix, right?
Yeah. And that's a church.
That's one of their churches.
And you could, I'm sure if you Google it, like they would come up kind of like LDS churches, like they're everywhere.
Yeah. They're all over the place.
It's wild. And the church, the like main hub in Mexico, it's like a spiral of like houses around it. Like there was one building in the middle and then like a pinwheel of streets just like going out and out and out and out.
Surrounding the church.
Yeah, surrounding the church of houses that just like made that the center, the light in the center. And it's crazy.
Yeah, I remember seeing the building like there, and it's in Guadalajara, right? The main building, and it's a beautiful building.
Yeah,
like the architecture, and I know it took, and what they say was all funded by members of the church.
Yep.
Like the apostles didn't leadership and clergy did not spend a penny of their own. To build this church, like it was built by these members. And most people know Mexico's not, the citizens of Mexico aren't exactly affluent people,
right?
Like they're not, you know,
driving. It's not the richest of the countries,
right? Like you're not, you're not living in Dubai, like where all those people got money.
Yeah.
So I think that's incredible that they were able to raise the funds and get that built, because I remember them even saying that the builders were volunteers, that they did not pay a single person to build that church.
Right.
And to me, I'm like, the only thing I can even fathom like what that's close to is like the Egyptian pyramids.
Yeah.
Was funded and built on the backs of slaves. Like, and these people don't think of it that way.
Right.
I'm like, but you literally spent your own money and put in your own labor to have this church for that these men are running. You're not in charge of it. You don't have a say in what goes on in there. You don't have a say in, you know, where you can go, what you can do. I'm like, these men who made you do this have all the power, which is very wild to me. I remember telling once I watched, and again, me too, like when you watch the documentary, it's very tough to get through.
Yeah.
Especially because
took me a little bit to get there.
Especially because the stories these women tell are so unfathomable, like stuff that children should never see, humans should never see,
right?
Let alone children. And you're right. And I was like, and then to know that they felt like it was for nothing. I told this story. I came out. My family doesn't talk to me. I can't go to the church. You know, people threaten me. And this man goes to prison for 17 years. And I was like, and that's the maximum sentence. I mean, you get out early if you you know, good behavior, or you just kind of, you know, keep your head down. I'm like, maybe he gets out in 10 years.
7 is like the magic number for good behavior.
7.
Yeah. 7
years. Like I was like, and you pled guilty to charges related to
sexually assaulting
minors.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's certain places. I'm like, Brittany Griner went to prison for fucking 9 years.
Right.
For having CBD or for having, what is it? For having THC in her fucking vape pen.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's like one of those things like, where's the justice in that?
Right. And there is none. And he will never go to trial in Mexico for the rapes that went there. Yeah. And, you know, the ancestors of these people who were raped by Aaron and his dad, Samuel, they'll never see justice. Yeah. And the closest thing they were going to get to justice is Nason going on trial and
going to prison for the rest of his
life. Being found guilty.
Yeah.
And then he was offered a fucking plea bargain.
Yeah. And then I do remember them saying, that he's doing his sermons from jail. And then I've also seen, I mean, you see interviews of his followers just saying no, they're all liars.
Yeah.
He's a good man. He's a man.
He would never do anything like that.
Do anything like this. Yeah. And it's just, I remember telling my mom, I really like the movie Book of Eli.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
So it's just about, you know, Denzel Washington playing Eli, and Gary Oldman he has like a small little community in this apocalyptic world because he visited these caverns when he was a kid that still have running water, and water at this point is like worth its weight in gold.
Okay.
So he has this little community of people. He's trying to get his hands on a Bible. And he tells his right-hand man, like, this book, these words are going to give us power. He's like, it's done it. He's like, it's done it all throughout history. Mm-hmm. It will happen again. And I'm like, and that, it's so true.
Right.
That book, that story of, God and Moses and Cain and Abel and all these people sacrificing themselves and their putting blind faith into something that's supposed to be good. I was like, it's very, very powerful. And you see it throughout history. Most of these cults are usually religious based.
Yeah.
I was like, because it's so easy to manipulate people. Like how he says, like, I'm the apostle of God. All these people believe it. So they're going to believe me over you.
Well, and they victimized the poor. So it wasn't like they went to the rich parts.
Right, no,
there are like rich parts of Mexico, but they didn't go to the rich parts of Mexico.
You can't.
preyed on the impoverished. I want to use bigger words than I can right now. They preyed on the poor people and gave them a light and gave them hope that, there's great big community was coming.
Right.
And then they did build like a cute little community.
Right.
And then they started raping people.
It's because, like you said, you don't have money. Your government's not doing anything for you. So then you suddenly have this governing body, if you want to put it that way, that's like, you join us, we'll give you
we'll
house.
Help you. Yeah.
We'll help you with food. We'll help you with, if you need to go to work and your children need someone to watch them, somebody. We got you.
Yeah.
I was like, and that's powerful to people. They're like, someone's taking care of me. I feel like I can count on someone. And no matter what we do, humans as a whole, we want belonging.
Yeah.
That's the reason why you join groups or why you like certain music or why even me, I'm like, I love going to Minute Maid Park.
Yeah.
And cheering with all the rest of the Astros fans because you're like, you're a part of.
You're a part of the community.
Everybody here likes the same thing that I like. I was like, and I think it's what it always boils down to. And yeah, and there are people. I think what always gets me is how the people are able to find people like that. So I tell people all the time, I'm like, I can't convince people to do anything for me. And these people are convincing whole droves of people to do these wild things. And I'm like, you've got to be very, very sinister. You've got to be very cutthroat. I think you have to have those traits of someone who is psychotic, just being able to disassociate these people's feelings and emotions from your, like, and just being like, hey, it is what it is type of thing. It was a very eye-opening documentary. Yeah, I would definitely recommend it to anybody. Like I said, it is tough. So if you take time to get through it, because I think it's maybe a total of 3 hours, 3 or 4 hours.
I think there were 3 episodes. Each of them was an hour.
Hour plus. Yeah. So I'm like, so it can be pretty heavy. And I think there's always certain things that stick out with me. I remember telling you the Golden State Killer, like him saying, "I'll be gone in the dark." Like I remember hearing that passage in the documentary when my mom was watching it, and instantly it just kind of made my skin crawl. Because I'm like, who says that? Like, what a thing to say to a victim that you're hurting, as if like, oh, it's gonna be fine.
Right.
Like, I'll be gone in the dark and everything's good.
Yep.
I remember hearing the one woman, one of the women saying that, she was being abused, and her sister, I think at the time was maybe like 8 or 9, maybe 10. And when she told Nason, like she's only 9 years old, he tells her, like, I should have had you bring her to me sooner.
Yeah, you should have brought her to me sooner. Yeah.
And just when I heard that, I'm just like, who is this man?
Right.
Do you not care about anybody else, like these members? And it's insane to me that still to this day, because you're right. I bet if you go to that church on Sunday, it's guaranteed it's full.
They're live streaming him from the jail.
Yep.
I think what is the other part, because I tried to sit in here and I'd be like, all right, was he born this way or did nature make him this way? Was it nurture and nature?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Was he nurtured into being a sex offender, or was he naturally going to be that way? So that, but then his people are like, he would never do that. So he knows it's wrong. He knows it's wrong. Mm-hmm. He knows he shouldn't be doing this, and he still continues to do it, or did it, mm-hmm. and continued to prey on children.
And when he gets out, I guarantee he'll do it again.
1,000%.
1,000%.
So to me, I feel like it was just what he was taught, and he knew it wasn't okay, but that's what you do.
Right.
And that doesn't make his actions right, because he knew what he was doing was wrong. Mm-hmm. And then he shouldn't have been doing it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Because I think, and I'm a part of me, I remember thinking about it too, because how he had multiple, each one, who was it? Was Nason, and who was the one before him?
Samuel
Joaquin, right? Mm-hmm. They had brothers, they had other siblings.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, maybe it was a little of both, because I'm sure they taught all their kids,
this is what you do.
Because I'm sure he told all of them, like, you could be the next apostle.
Yeah.
So you need to, know how to do these things. I was like, but maybe there was a little bit of like, okay, who has that nature in them? Mm-hmm. Who's the one that's actually going to go through with it?
Yeah.
Because you could be taught this your whole life, and when it comes down to it, if you're just naturally like, you're just like, yeah, I know this is wrong and I don't want to do it myself. I was like, they can't have somebody do that, because then you chose the wrong person. And what if they try and change things?
So
it's a lot harder to get rid of the apostle than it is just a regular person.
Right. So even before Samuel died, Nason knew that he would be the next person. So even though, what was it? Samuel died on December 8th, and then on December 14th, Nason was announced as like the new person.
New apostle.
But they had this like apostle celebration, and like everybody came and like worshiped day and night, and like didn't eat or drink or exhausted themselves, like, oh God, who's going to be next? Like they knew it was going to be one of Samuel's sons, and it came down between Nason and another one of his Samuel's sons, who also did like a lot of missionary work for the church. But because Nason created this, that Brea,
the television.
The television, like
that media outlet.
Yeah. Samuel had led Nason to believe that he would be the next one.
Okay.
Told Nason that he would be the next one. So when they announced it, 12 days later, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 7 days later, one of Nason's secretaries was like, didn't you know? And he was like, well, you just never know. Like, so they put on this like big production to make people
think like it's happening on the fly. Like God's telling him who was going to be the next one.
And so that's when some of his like secretaries and like clergy were like, I don't know about this.
That's kind of weird.
And then he was found sexually assaulting people.
Yeah. And I think it's, great. Another good one to watch. I haven't seen the whole thing, but, is, what's his name? Andrew Garfield. Is Into the Banner of Heaven.
Into the Banner of Heaven.
Yeah, how he's questioning the church, and in there as well. Yeah, I remember my sister saying that she liked the line when he's telling one of the leaders that like that their religion is a breeding ground for bad men to like take power and to assert themselves over other people. And I'm like, yeah, I was like, it's not just your religion. I think it's the whole religion as a whole. I was like, it's the only thing that resembles that. Checks everything of a cult that people don't believe is a cult.
Well, and then the leaders are like, well, don't look at our history.
Right. So. Don't question it. Don't look at the history. You just, continue to pray, And again, I'm not against faith. I think most people aren't. I say all the time, like, if you have a relationship with God and that relationship with God makes you feel good and it makes you be a better person, I'm like, all for it.
Sure.
Do what you got to do. You know what I mean? Like, if you have a personal relationship with God and you're a better person for it, all well and done. Sure. All well and good. I was like, but it's just human nature to take advantage of other people.
And it's easy to do. And we see it time and time again.
You see it all the time.
And we clearly see it here. Because it happened from the very start. They preyed on poor people, and then it just escalated. What you do.
Because like you said, I'm assuming even in the early days, it's one of those things where it's like, well, I'll get you kicked out of the church. And then what are you going to have?
Right.
Like, we give you food, we give you clothing, we give you everything that you have. So what are you going to do?
You're going to break the community by not doing what I say.
And also, I remember them saying, like they would threaten the kids, like, or like even the parents. I remember them giving examples where kids were telling their parents, like,
Yeah.
This is what's happening to me. And their parents were like, you should feel honored.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
it's a blessing
Yep.
that the apostle of God wants you to be there for him.
And wants you to do these things.
Wants you to do these things. Mm-hmm. And it's so mind blowing to me because you would think like your children come before anything else.
Right.
I was like, but these people are taught and it's instilled in them that the church is above everything. And I was like, and that is the basic teaching of especially Christianity as well.
Yeah.
Like it's God first.
Then your parents. Then your spouse.
Then your spouse, your husband. Like I was like, it's a hierarchy and they're like, God is above everything. Like you put your religious beliefs before your family and your own.
Yep.
Which when you, in retrospect, when you think about it is crazy to me.
Insane. Yeah.
Insane to me.
I remember, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
There was a story about one of the little girls who experienced sexual assault. She was like, I remember the first time I went to the temple, we had a extra long bath. My mom put me in like this really pretty gown and I lined up with all these other girls. And my mom told me, like, make sure I look really pretty for Nason. And then Nason came out and chose me. And my mom was like the happiest she could ever be because her little girl got chosen. But I was sexually assaulted.
Being chosen by God. Then that's what they believe in.
And she was like, I remember my mom telling me like, I want to be chosen. I want to be the one to be there. I want to be the one that Nason picks out or his clergy picks out. You want to be that person. And they like raise their kids to be wanting of that.
Yeah.
Like wanting to go, be, I don't think they necessarily knew they were being sexually assaulted, but like they wanted to be picked to be a part of the church or a part of something bigger. My eyes are really itchy all of a sudden.
Oh. It's all right. It's okay. You're just crying. It's all right. No, you're right. And I think that it was always the craziest part to me. The fact that some of these girls they said like their family still does not talk to them.
Yeah.
They've disowned them.
Yep.
Like like they're embarrassing them or they, they went against the apostle. So you can't talk to them anymore. And I'm like, I don't know if that's just out of loyalty to the church or if that's just, I don't know if that's how they really feel or if that's out of fear as well.
Well, it could be both. Like they could be completely brainwashed that the church.
Right. Or like you said, even see what happened and be like, well, I can't say anything. Like,
yeah. What's the point of me saying something? It's going to happen to me.
And what did they get? They didn't get anything out of it.
Right. One of his accomplices is going into witness protection. Like,
right.
For Christ's sake.
And I think it's crazy too that they haven't charged any, because it's not just the apostles that are doing this. I mean, he has his clergy, his higher up, guy. They're all men.
Well, they can't get them unless they can prove that they did it in the States,
Yeah. And it's one of those things that's like, there's a reason why women aren't allowed to be leaders in this church.
Right.
I was like, because more often than I don't think that these women who were groomed, who became groomers themselves, wanted to commit acts against these children.
Yeah.
But you're right. I remember watching it, and even before they had the trial, before his groomers pled guilty, I remember telling my dad, I was like, it's so difficult. I was like, because I said, how do you tell someone you should have known that was wrong? You should have done something about this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they're victims themselves. Like no matter, like it's different. Like Ghislaine Maxwell, like that bitch. I was like, she did it on her own. She had this loyalty to Jeffrey Epstein, and she wasn't assaulted.
She knew better.
Right. She knew better. But you're right. I'm like, but if you're a little girl being raped from the time you're 8 years old to the time you're 25, and the only way it's going to stop, they're like, hey, you know what? This can stop for you. You just have to bring other people to me. I'm like, any person who,
they're like, look, you served me so well, and I want you to continue to serve me.
A different way, though.
In a different way. And then that's how they get these women who are, quote unquote, old enough to know better to bring in
more
others.
Children. Yeah, bring in other children. Yeah. And I'm like, I remember saying that I was all, that's going to be tough. I was like, I said, yeah, you're angry with them for allowing it to happen. I was like, but they're victims too. Like, how are you going to send someone to prison for the rest of their life when it was through no fault of their own? It's a product of their environment.
Right. And that's why
I remember. Oh, sorry.
No, that's why Alondra Ocampo pled guilty, because she was like, I didn't know, I'm sorry. And then her husband, so backtrack, her husband found like USBs at their house of like footage of Nason like raping children or like raping minors. I should say minors, not children, because it could have been like 17, but still.
Yeah.
And turn that over to the police. So that like helped lessen Alondra's sentence.
Okay. It's just, it's a heavy case. It's tough to watch, especially to hear a lot of the recounts like of these women talking about their experiences, just because you can really hear that, you can hear the pain that's there.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, I was like, you don't really realize it until later on. Like, I'm like, yeah, these women that go through these sexual assaults, I'm like, it changes them forever. They're never the same. I was like, the person who does it gets to just go on with their life. I did what I did. I don't feel bad about it. It was just, a notch on the belt type of thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, but the person it happens to, I'm like, they never forget it. It's going to live with them forever. And they have to live with it every day that they wake up.
Yep.
So I think you're right. It was definitely slap in the face for them to do the plea deal behind their back. And I know that they did get to speak, right, to one of the judges.
They had like a representative speak to the judge after the plea deal.
Yeah.
And she was like, she said, this is a slap in the face to all of us who have put our lives on the line.
Yeah, because I remember some of them sharing their stories with that judge, and unfortunately he couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
But I think it was good for them to be able to at least say it to this man, to know like what's happening here is wrong.
Yeah. So if any of our listeners, are a victim of the La Luz Del Mundo, I highly recommend you find these Facebook groups, these Reddit groups. So you're not alone.
And there's a lot of good resources here in Arizona as well. I know they have some from Maricopa County, from Phoenix, for anyone who's a victim of sexual assault in general, not even just by this church. Which it's hard to come forward, and I think the more you've researched on it, you're right, because I think so many people, you just want to forget it. Like, I want to put that behind me. I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah.
And like you said, how many times has it happened where you come forward and then nothing happened?
Right.
Or it's a lesser sentence than it should be,
or you feel like even if I say something, it doesn't matter. Like, I can't tell you how many girls told me things in high school. Charles is really going to kill me. Told me things in high school that I was like, so we going to the principal? Like, we're going to go tell Miss Main? Like, can we go talk to somebody? And they'd be like, no. And I'd be like, what? Like, why? And, eat my own words. I did the same thing. Like, things happened to me in high school, and I would tell my friends, and they'd be like,
you should tell
so
somebody.
we got to go talk to somebody? And I'd be like, no, like, what's the point? And I think the culture around it is changing, and I feel like that's very good, but how can we say it's changing when shit like this happens?
Right. And like you said, this wasn't the 60s, the 50s, the 40s. Like, this was...
It's 2020.
This is 2020.
Yeah.
And it's a sad thing. And I also think as well, the culture that we're in, especially with men, you are not taught being young. And I tell, my parents, I tell my dad all the time too. I mean, and again, you can't blame your parents for not teaching you what they didn't know themselves.
Right.
I was like, but it is always instilled in you as a boy, like, it's never told you, like, if a woman's telling you no, like, sometimes like, oh, that just means, you should try harder a little bit. You know what I mean? Oh, you need to do something more to impress her.
Right.
It's never being told, like, if a woman's telling you no, like, you need to back off.
Right.
You have to stop. And there's so many times I think we're not told as men growing up what consent is, what coercing is. I said, because badgering a woman into just her finally saying yes, I was like, is not consent.
Right.
But you, in your head as a man, you're like, well, I wasn't taught that.
Green light, go.
Right. I'm gonna keep going. I'll keep asking. I'll keep being persistent. And when she finally says yes, great. That means yes. So it's good. It's time to go. When you look back at it and you're like, that's not what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Consent is a lot different than pressuring someone or coercing someone into finally saying yes. But I think that's also changing as well.
Yeah.
Because I think especially women like you, my sister, Lexi, like, I think that's going to be the generation, like, even, you may not have kids of your own, but you have people that have kids around you that you're going to care about, that I think you will also teach them these lessons.
Right. impact and influence them, or be a safe zone for them to come to.
Absolutely. Because I think that's a big problem as well. I think even growing up, like dress code for women is weird.
Yeah.
The fact that you're like, you can't dress what we deem provocative because it's too distracting to boys.
And our male teachers.
When really you're like, how are you not going to these younger men and older men and saying, hey, how about we don't sexualize a 16-year-old girl?
Right.
Or just because she's wearing something that shows her skin doesn't, say that she's promiscuous.
Just because my strap is 2 inches rather than
exactly.
3.
Yeah. And, or, if, especially if a girl, develops younger, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, she can't wear tank tops anymore. You can't wear things that are too tight. You can't do this because you're putting out certain messages to men, and they're going to think that you want, to sleep with them, or they're going to think that you're easy. It's so many things now when you look back on it, and you're like, it's very, very toxic. And I like to think it's changing. And then I see things like Andrew Tate and the comments that men make on there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of times it's scary. How men are on there like, oh yeah, this guy's speaking the truth. Like, oh yeah, so, maybe we're getting a little off topic. I'm sorry. But the last one Charles and I talked about the concept of hoflation, which is a concept that men have come up with, saying that they have to work 5 times harder for women that are 10 times worse than their grandmothers. They have to work 5 times harder than their grandfathers for women that are 10 to 20 times worse than their grandmothers. And they wholeheartedly believe this, that these women, they no longer want to cook. They no longer want to take care of their families. So therefore they no longer provide that value anymore. But men also we have to be good looking. You have to be in shape. You have to have money. Like, we have to do all these crazy things, and these women have to do nothing. And I remember the first time I heard the phrase and they finished it, I was like, okay, well, my first question is, what are you deeming as worse?
Yeah.
That she's educated?
Right.
That she doesn't want to come home to a dude sitting on the couch and dishes are dirty and you have to make dinner every night, or, I'd say I'm like basically taking care of a grown kid, which I think that's the basis of it. And so it's just things like that I'm always like, it's definitely, it's weird.
Yeah.
It is changing, but at the same time, I think there's always going to be that group that's going to hold on tighter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You feel that power grip, you're slipping from you, so you kind of grip a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I was like, even the name, I said, we're going to use hoe, which is a derogatory term for a female, as the term of this hoflation that you're talking about. And like I said, I read the comments, and some of these men wholeheartedly believe this, and I'm just like, did you not have a mother? Like, do you want other men to think of your sibling, your sister, your cousin, your mom, your whatever? Do you want other people to think of you like this?
Right.
Like, or think of them that way? So
it's insane.
But
our world's wild.
It is, yeah.
We're just here to tell stories.
Tell the story.
Yeah. Try to maybe help where we can. I don't know.
Yeah, and they but yeah, no, I think this was, like I said, it was very heavy hitting piece. And I remember when I watched it, because me, if you guys don't know, I'm not a serial killer fan, but I'm sure we will do some serial killer.
I like the one-offs as well.
Yeah, so. But I have found that I like survivor stories. That like stuff like cults are very, very interesting to me.
Maybe I can revive some of the ones I did on with Josh. Yeah. So if you haven't, there's I believe 6 episodes that I was on with Josh. With Josh. And I go through, I feel like I can't even go back and name all the things I covered, but I've covered things like Stonewall, Mary Vincent.
Stonewall was really good. That's the one I'd recommend.
Stonewall one was really good. I just did the Yosemite Killer case, and that was the one that we did by ourselves, that we were like, maybe we should continue to do this by ourselves. People like this, yeah. So, highly recommend going back and watching those. They're all really great. They've all got some really great conversations. I did Elisa Lam as one of them.
We did the guy who created the doll.
I just can't think of his name off the top of my head.
That guy too, though.
Yeah.
I remember I told at the end of it, I was like, that guy had no repercussions in his story.
No, he had no repercussions.
No repercussions. So, didn't get tried, didn't get left by his wife, did not have his kid.
Yeah, no, his wife stayed with him.
Yes. Wow. I'm like... So, but again, I was like, that could also be down to back then, women didn't have anything without men.
Right.
What do I have if I leave him? Different conversation for a different day. I was like, 'cause you could talk about that.
We could go back into it.
You could go on that forever. Like how men are finally, I think, are also realizing that women don't need men.
Yeah.
yes, you want companionship, but if they want to go out on their own, I'm like, women can do anything. Like they can get their own houses, they get their own jobs, they can live their own lives. And I was like, sometimes they're like, you know what? I'm just going to be with other women now. And I'm like, hey, I don't blame you.
Hey, do it.
Hey, don't blame me, sisters.
Yeah.
But no, this is a good first episode. I'm excited to get the rest of them going. So if you guys have a one-off or, you know, something that isn't even really widely broadcasted that we can look into or tell, I think that would be cool as well. Because I know I've heard of people doing like local.
Yeah, we could
like going to like local people, like more like untold missing persons cases, things like that. Because, you know, unfortunately, not every missing persons case blows up how some of these big ones have.
Yeah. Drop some names in our comments section here on YouTube or on our social media, the Speaking Spatter Pod.
For Instagram.
That's our only social media
right now.
We don't have an email yet. I don't think so, but I will work on that.
Yeah, you can send everything still like if there's
to the Dry Heap Podcast.
Yeah, it's the Dry Heap Podcast at gmail.com.
Yeah.
So you can always send stuff there as well because our producer and engineer Charles, who puts this all together, thankfully for us, will still look at that and do that. So yeah, definitely any suggestions about stories you want to hear, stuff that isn't really well known, or like I said, anyone local.
Yeah.
I would definitely, that'd be pretty cool to kind of deep dive a lot of these people's stories that you don't hear about.
And I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to research things.
Yeah. Because unfortunately, not all of them are like, like John Benet Ramsey. Like, not everybody's story is told that way.
Yep.
So yeah, no, it's a good episode. I don't know if do you have anything, do we want to end this in a certain way? Like with Josh, you know, I say no aquariums and no zoos.
Well, I don't want to say that.
I know. It's just an example.
I mean, we could say what I said the last time that we ended.
Yeah.
You were cool with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
remember, you're Josh.
Yeah, I'm Josh.
And I'm Amber. And support your local drag. And thanks for being here with us.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
See you episode 2.